everyone, and welcome back to the Ascend AI podcast where real estate meets innovation. I'm your host, Hannah Taylor, and today I'm joined by Mike Carr from Anything Real Estate, a broker whose path into real estate is anything but traditional. He started as an auctioneer right out of high school, helped lay the groundwork for what became auction.com, and eventually, almost by accident, built a brokerage, boutique brokerage known for high standards, strong training, and a commitment to helping agents build real wealth. Mike, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, very excited, Hannah. Very excited.
Yeah, so tell us where you're calling in from today.
We're actually from Jefferson, Georgia, which is about 40 minutes north of Atlanta proper, right up the 85 corridor. So,
Got it.
yeah,
Excellent. Well, I'm super excited to dive into your story because it's really unique, and one of the most unique ones that I've heard in the industry. So let's start from the beginning. You started as an auctioneer. You nearly sold, I think, 300 homes in 2008. And then, you helped kind of form what became auction.com, and now you opened a boutique brokerage. So can you share a bit about that story and how it fits into what you're doing today?
sure. The long story short is my first passion was to be an auctioneer. My dad was a car dealer and he bought a lot of inventory at auction, and so I spent a lot of time there as a youngster. And fell in love with the craft, and talked to a couple of the auctioneers about what I wanted to do with my career when I got out of high school. And you have to be 18 to get a license, so I had to wait for that moment and went to school for that. My mentor, my main mentor, told me I should get my real estate license because in the state of Georgia, to auction off a piece of property, you have to have the auctioneer's license and the real estate broker's license, and so or salesperson's license at the time. And so I did that. I worked with a couple of brokers and ended up with Alabama license, ended up South Carolina, North Carolina licenses. And so used mainly that license to just build my portfolio. So simultaneous of being an auctioneer and learning how to do that, which is about a 5-year apprenticeship to really get rolling in that industry. I was calling some sales on the side for other brokers, that sort of thing, real estate sales on Saturdays, farm sales, that sort of thing. And then I was also utilizing my salesperson's license to get the commissions back on properties that I was investing in, mostly residential properties, a little bit of light commercial. So through the 90s, I was working on building my portfolio for my own future wealth. And then 2000, I opened up my own brokerage to get autonomy. I didn't want another broker telling me, well, no, you can't go work for that broker, or no, you can't go call that sale for that auction company. And so I still had the thought that I would just utilize it for myself. My younger sister got her license, got into the industry. Her friend got into the industry. I housed a couple of licenses, but I didn't really build an infrastructure for that. Wasn't interested in it. And then 2006, 2007, on the pre-wave, right? The undercurrent that we saw coming for what became the mortgage debacle between 2008 and 2013. I was approached by a company out of Irvine, California, to broker a 300 property auction for them in Atlanta. And I said, I can do one better. I'm actually a trained auctioneer. And it was just like a perfect union. It was just the marriage of the need being fulfilled. And both sets, they had far-reaching tentacles with banks and that sort of thing. I had the experience level to do what they needed done. And our first sale was highly successful. We had like 296 properties. I think at the first sale, we sold 290 of those. And
Amazing.
so we said, okay, we need to do this. And the very next week, I was on a plane to Los Angeles and started setting up shop, and we did. And then I ended up licensed in 30 plus states as an auctioneer and as a real estate broker, and I've sold property in 35 of the 50 states. So well over 125,000 transactions in total. And I'm personally responsible for, at the time until I left them, I was responsible for about 70,000 of those. We would go days where we would literally sell 1,000 houses in a day
Wow,
at
that's
auction.
incredible. That's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible.
So, it was a good and bad thing because I had a portfolio at home that I wanted to recover right? Like every other real estate investor, I didn't want to wake up one day and my portfolio be worth a quarter of what it was, 6 months ago. And at the same time, I really appreciated the opportunity of preparing this meeting opportunity. And when we're doing that, it sort of set me up for this great success. In the meantime, what I did was while I was living in California, while I was traveling the United States and having auctions in all these different states, I did have a maintenance crew here, and I had an office here with several employees. That grew to about 18 employees. We ended up with eight trucks for doing maintenance and that sort of thing. And so I sold the service to a lot of the investors that I was selling to, that we would rehab their houses for them. So then I ended up involved with maybe 2,000 rehabs over the course of the next 6 or 7 years. But good auctioneers are working themselves out of a job. And so I thought that I would come back to my little small town, which is a lot larger now than it was then. And I thought that I would just be a real estate investor. And when all of that calmed down, I resigned from auction.com and came back home. I bought a piece of property, and the agent that had that listed convinced me to open up a brokerage. And so that's how I ended up here 12 years later with a brokerage and still building my real estate portfolio. That's still the number
What a
one.
story. I think there's very few people out there that can say they have a similar background in history. It's incredible what you've been able to accomplish.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us a little bit about the brokerage that you run today. How big is it? What is your role in the brokerage? What are you spending your day to day on? I'd love to
Yeah.
hear what that all looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Like brokerages they ebb and flow, right? I never had the dream of being having a brokerage, and then when that dream was sold to me, I still didn't have the dream that that brokerage would be something, just what I call lovingly the puppy mill, right? Just bring in, train a bunch of people that'll pay you a fee every month, but they're not going to sell real estate, right? They odds are they've put this investment of time and money in, but it's either not for them or life and time and circumstance doesn't work out for them. It's a hard business, Hannah, you're in it. And if you're good at it and you desire it, you can make more money than you can spend ever. If you're just not really in love with it, it's a struggle. It's hard. So my thought was from the get-go, I'm like, well, why don't we bring in agents and let's train those agents as best as possible of how to reach the public, like how to get to the people that everybody's your customer, right? Because everybody could potentially buy a home, especially if they set the steps up correctly. And so that was our thought process. And I had hired a company owned by Tanya Eberhardt. At the time, it was called Remerge. She went through a different branding and it became Brand Face. And I hired her to be my marketing arm, and she ended up selling me marketing but teaching me branding. And so what we did with the branding was we offered that branding to agents. And the interesting thing about it was while she was selling branding to real estate agents in 46 different states, I was building a firm based on that branding. Now, you can't give that kind of thing away. There has to be an investment to it, the same as an investment towards what you need for a real estate license. And then you've got to put that out there to work for you. The interesting numbers were at our largest time, we had 26 agents. Out of those 26 agents, seven of them were professionally branded by Brandface. If you took one of those seven people that had been professionally branded out of the mix, they did more business than the other 19 put together. So the lowest branded agent did more business than all the other people who didn't make that investment in time, effort, and money end up growing their business. So I thought that was really amazing. And so as this business does, and I don't know how long you've been in it, but you'll figure it out if you hadn't. This business ebbs and flows. When you train somebody, everything behind the curtain, right? You're the odds, and you stick my head behind the curtain. You're just a human. They so many times you have different factions that come against you for your good, I would say. And so there's been ebbs and flows where agents have come in totally newbies, and we have branded them, worked with them, and built them to be literally top producers in our entire board, our entire region, right? Sales awards, just accolades for days and days and days. And then they do different things, right? So they may go open their own brokerage. I've had a couple of people we've trained open their own brokerages. One of them highly successful, the other one not successful at all, right? I had another guy that came through and we branded him. He did really well. And then he moved on to have an investment company. That's all that he does now. Another one turned into a wholesaler, right? So we've had this, but every time we see a mix up in our culture like that, we take a step back and we look at it and we're like, okay, there's a reason why what we were doing didn't seem valuable for them to stay. And then we
Mhm.
try to work on that. And so one of the things that I had never done before, and a lot of people, like your listeners, would laugh about this, is I never had a CRM. We ran auction.com off of Excel sheets. They were very complicated Excel sheets, but
Imagine.
I was like, well, we don't need it. You know what I mean? Let's just make sure that we capture all our clients' information. And we so wrong about that. And I was so wrong about that for 12 years up until now. So, one of the changes that I'm sure we'll talk about this is getting into the technology that we
Mhm.
sort of avoided. We wanted a relationship with the people that we trained, and we wanted them to go and take care of the relationships that we were building with the brand.
Yeah, I mean, that's
So
absolutely
sorry.
critical is to stay up with the times. And I understand too, right? I think the old school method, and I've talked to people who've been in the industry for 20, 30 years, it's like this was the phone book and you pick up your phone and dial and you're part of the community and that's it. But I think today, with the volume that's coming in and people being, first to the phone is so important. Like it is important to have a
Yeah.
CRM. It's something that helps keep us organized and grounded because I think we're just the times have changed where I think, needing to be much more efficient with our time
Mhm.
because there are so many other things we need to manage. We need to manage our brand now. We need to manage our social medias. We need to manage, our sphere and our events and everything that didn't always exist in the real estate world.
Right.
So I think that's a perfect segue to the next section, which is really, the shifts in the industry that you've been seeing. So what are some industry trends? I think technology being one of them. But what are some trends that you're seeing and how are you, running your brokerage to kind of, change your growth strategy to meet those new needs within the market?
Yeah. Good question. Uh, I don't know how to set up the answer because I think it is a very interesting shift that I've noticed in the past year, especially. This, for the most part, if we just laid a blanket over the industry, this has been a really tough year, right?
Mhm.
I had predicted that last year would be the tougher year. We ended up with not only the highest volume we've ever achieved, but December was the highest month inside of that highest year that we've ever had in our history.
Wow.
Only to roll the year, and in many of your listeners, if they're in the real estate business, they've seen this, that only to see that really just dwindle, 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 dwindle. I didn't read the report of how many people in the industry did not make a paycheck in October or now November of this year, but it's astronomical. The people who had no closings, right? And so, one of the things I think that have affected us really terribly, and I don't know what the fix of the outcome is going to be, of course, is the lawsuit that happened in Missouri and Illinois, but subsequently Illinois about this buyer's agency situation. And I think that it's been really harmful not only to the industry, but it also has been harmful to the individuals that we service because now there's not enough information and education about what a buyer's agent did for the industry and to protect a person. And then now all they heard was, oh my goodness, we don't have to pay a real estate agent, right? And so now our real estate agents have to be even more on top of their game to explain to them where the value of that counterpart is. I've been saying it for the 12 years I've owned the brokerage. There's really only one real estate commission, right? It's period. It doesn't matter like who is contractually going to give that money to you. The fact of the matter is a seller has a number they've got to be above, and a buyer's got a number they don't want to be above, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
real estate agents are in the middle putting these things together with value and with ethics and with morality, hopefully, right? And following the law and protecting the consumers, and they need to be paid. And so it doesn't, we can argue all day long that Gary Keller did something wrong, or because I know personally he took it on the chin where the NAR wasn't prepared, didn't defend us correctly. I don't think they handled it right, even on the back end. It's a terrible thing. And it put all of us on edge. And I think that also added to a fallout in our industry. Okay, so what does that mean for us? What do we do? Every time there's a fallout like that, there's opportunity. And I do believe that the opportunity in the future needs to be pointed very strongly towards our listings and not so much our buyer's agency, because you also have in the background here, you have Andy Florence and Homes.com, who is really pushing the agenda that there's no reason for a buyer to call a buyer's agent, call the person who has the listing. The problem with that is, as we all know that are licensed and professionals, we've already promised our fiduciary responsibility to the person we listed the house for. So nobody on the buyer side is looking after the buyer. They're completely a customer. There's going
Hmm.
to be problems with that. There's
Hmm.
going to be huge
Yeah,
problems with that. The
absolutely.
second thing, too, though, that I've noticed, and I think this is big in our technology world, if you go in our region, and I watch a region between very weekly between the Atlanta market through the Charlotte, North Carolina market into the Southern Virginia market. Okay, so I'm in between this territory at least every other week. And what I am watching in every community I'm keeping my eye on, when you go into a neighborhood, you used to see anything real estate would have five of the 15 houses listed in that neighborhood. It would have three of the nine. It would have five of the 10, right?
Mhm.
If y'all start looking around and seeing what you're seeing now, I'm not seeing that anymore. I'm literally seeing neighborhoods across the street from where I live where seven, eight, nine, 10 houses have been sold in the last 2 years, and the same agent has never sold two.
Mhm.
It is very odd the way our populace is treating the agents as a commodity. This is where branding actually comes into play very strongly, so you can establish your space. But I do believe that it's the age of the relationship. And I think that if we're not personally dealing with that person and teaching our sphere to refer us, we're going to have a hard time finding business. I think over are the days we can just blanket with mail outs and get phone calls.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great call out, and it's really important for agents to stay on top of that. And I do agree. I think branding is a huge component. Working your sphere and staying in touch and staying a part of the community and really having a face. Because I think I don't even know what the statistic is about the number of agents out there today, too, right? It's like they pop up left and right consistently. But
Yes,
I think it's in something like only 20% are actually successful.
yes.
And so I know
The
you've seen that
Pareto principle.
actually. What was that?
The Pareto principle. Yep.
Yeah,
80,
yeah.
80, 80, 20. It always sticks. Doesn't matter if it's a church, a synagogue, a ball club. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's a brokerage. 20% of the people are doing 80% of the business. Always.
Interesting. So
Yep.
interesting. So I know that you've seen that within your own brokerage too, where you have kind of this, I think it's called the guild, which is more your, I don't want to say higher achievers, but the people that are a little bit motivated to take their business to the next level, a little bit more committed and have a little bit more accountability. Tell us about that section of the business and what you're working on with that group of people.
So we've tried this several times in our tenure as a brokerage, where we take the people that are really putting the effort forward, and we try to give them special attention. So the idea of it is you give the hot man the ball. That's the way I looked at it, and I would feed people that were actually returning results.
Mm.
And so that sort of that worked. It worked pretty good, but it creates in some ways an animosity rather than a friendly competition. And so we didn't want that, right? We want the playing field to be fair for everybody. So as long as you come into the system and you work the system, then the system's good to you and you're good to the system. And so the guild has been our latest at that. But the total idea of it is we come together on a weekly basis and we go over every phone call and we discuss I've trained my guild members, of which there were five and now there's only four, and we're hoping I have a recruiting call tomorrow that there will be five again. But we hold each other accountable. So like it's not just me as the broker saying, well, why didn't you follow up on that person? Or why did you not do this? Or, hey, you did that and it worked incredibly. Now the guild, we sit like at a round table and everybody has a say so. And it's really working well as motivation for people because, as you know, this business, personal motivation is good, but it is really hard for us to do. We need to have our peers that are helping shore us up. You know, when we go through those weeks where the phone doesn't ring, weeks where nobody responded to our outreach, weeks where, you know, everybody's ignoring us, ignoring us, ignoring us, and then all of a sudden they have to have us. We find that if we have a good group that gets along really well, then they can support each other in that process. You know, and especially when we see success here, but somebody is not getting that kind of success. And then it's also, they come with the expectation that I'm not necessarily going to sugarcoat anything. It's harder to do with a newbie, harder to do with somebody who comes into this firm and they've been doing it for 20 years and they don't want to change. The guild members, we strip that away, right? There's no ego to it. There's just business. Like, where did we go wrong? How come we missed that? How come we were not able to get that property sold? Did the conversation come across to that client the way it was supposed to for you to get across to them? They need to lower that price no matter what they think, or, you know, or can we sell around that? We've gone into the guild members and rewrote our descriptions and had somebody else write the description for this person's listing, and we've seen that be successful. So the idea of the guild is definitely the upper echelon are people that want to rise to that occasion. And they're not the people that are going to cut the phone off at 5 p.m. because now they need their personal time, right? You have to be, I don't encourage somebody to work 7 days a week. I'm not saying that. Everybody should have their Sabbath. Everybody should have their day off. If you don't take care of yourself, then your body will, and you'll shut down, and then you'll be in trouble. So we definitely want people to, you know, God first, family second, business third, but you got to be accountable to that. And the guild helps that happen. And I
Yeah.
don't have to be the guy just, you know,
I love that. You know,
I'm
having a
not
peer
that
group that keeps each other accountable is so effective. So what are you seeing within that group that people are struggling the most with, and what are they succeeding the most with?
The follow-up is a problem. Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's another reason why this we really delved into the CRM stronger
Mm.
than we've ever done it before. We had always been a brokerage that understood two things. Some people are not going to do what they need to do, and some people get too busy to do what they're going to do. But if you're a real estate agent that really wants to have longevity in this industry, one of the mistakes that you will make is when you get the ball rolling, and next thing you know, you fought tooth and nail to get 2, 3 closings in a month, and now you're focusing on the problems of those closings. You stop doing what it was that you needed to do to get to the 4 closings, right? So then now the 4 closings are over, and you got this big pile of money, but you're going to have to manage that really wisely because with that cycle you have to potentially think it's going to be another 3 or 4 months before I have 3 or 4 closings. Now, that all averages out, obviously, if you did that in a year to 12 closings. But if you really want to scale up a business, you can't do that. So you need systems, and systems are where real estate agents fail greatly. And I was one of them. We had systems from the get-go. So for instance, I always had a VA that as soon as one of our real estate agents had success in like a neighborhood, so let's say they get a listing and they're in that neighborhood, whether we are already known in that neighborhood or not known in that neighborhood, then he would automatically start a mail out campaign. So we
Mm.
would canvass that as from the brokerage on behalf of that agent. We saw that work incredibly. Like it was because that agent didn't have the time to do that. And I
Mm.
think that a CRM really enhances that more, especially in the day that we live in now. And like some of your expertise in AI nowadays, there's no excuse that you don't have a couple of buttons to click, and then you know, you're touching those people in social media, you're touching those people in an email, you're touching those people in a nice text, you're staying in touch with those people. And so that's something that has changed over the years, where we provided it before with a human. I think now you can use technology to do the same thing, but it's very important that you do that. Like if you don't do that, you are going to constantly do this in the real estate industry, and that can be taxing. on
Yeah.
our longevity.
Absolutely. I remember that my first year was extremely feast or famine, right?
Yes.
It was exactly that. When I was feasting, I was forgetting to prospect. And there was no just consistency within my business. And that's been actually one of the biggest improvements that I've seen within my business is last year I was consistent from January to December. And thank heavens, because that really saved me. I
Yeah.
think the year before, I think I had nine under contract consistently from June all the way through September. I couldn't breathe. I was working 14-hour days every single day, right? And shut down of my body was absolutely something that happened. So no, I like how
Mhm.
you're teaching just consistency, constant prospecting, never turning your eyes to acquiring new business and working that sphere. Because I think that that's so important. And I love how you've also taken the ownership and saying, hey, let me help the business, help my brokers canvas. Let me help my brokers brand themselves. Because those are two things, as we talked about before, we've just got so much stuff on our plates now. It's hard to juggle them all. And if you're just starting, you don't have the time to hire a VA or to hire somebody that can, outsource, some of the social media. You just don't have the budget for it. So I love that you're doing that for your agents. Um,
Yeah.
so let's look forward. Let's look to the next 6 to 12 months. Where do you see the brokerage being? What are the big goals that you have for yourself?
Well, we've standardized a lot with our business. Again, we focused on follow-ups and things like that, and how that would look. We're very community driven. We used to hold a Santa Claus event at our office for 7 years straight. I had the greatest Santa Claus in the history of mankind. He, fantastic guy. But he got older. He's 84 years old, and he told me for the last 2 years, "I'm not going to do this, Michael. I'm not going to do this." And then he'd do it, and he'd be calling me, "Hey, we're doing Santa. Yeah, we're doing it." And so this last year we had the biggest turnout ever, and he cut his hair and his beard the next week. So I knew then, okay, he's done. So
Done.
one of the shifts that we made, we still believe in community, but one of the shifts we made now is we're the presenting sponsor for our city Santa Claus. So
Oh,
whereas before we worked with them, so we didn't overlay Santa Clauses, they were the first week, we were the second week. That's one of the shifts that we've made that I think is really great. So the takeaway for your listeners is you got to be community involved. That if you want to overcome what a mail out won't do for you so great anymore, right? When that whole analogy of I'm telling that real life stories about where you're going into a neighborhood and the same real estate agent is not listing several houses in that neighborhood anymore. Community is the way you're going to overcome that, being involved in the community. So we're ramping up our things that we're doing and requiring the guild members, especially, to be a part of those things. It's very, very important that people see you out about in the area that you want to serve.
mhm.
If they don't see you, you're not going to be able to overcome it with technology. They need both. The technology and the follow-ups, those are things that remind them of who you are. You really need to be trying to put yourself in a position of shaking hands with them, and
Absolutely.
knowing more about them. It's super important. Super important.
Important. At the end of the day, we're in a people business, right? And so
We're in the people business.
we're in the people business. So,
Yes.
so getting into
Contracts will not
people,
save you if you can't have a relationship with somebody. You must build and foster that relationship. It's more important now than it's ever been.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Last and final question for you. If you had a magic wand that could fix anything within your business, not necessarily the industry, but your business, that could be operational, cultural, financial, anything, or just a mundane task that you hate doing over and over again, what would you change?
Communication. Yeah.
Mm,
The communication is important, inside the organization as well as outside the organization, and especially in the business that we're in now.
mhm.
The communication tends to lead to assumptions, and assumptions always turn out bad. So, I'm constantly trying to get my agents to understand, and also my staff and personnel, that the finite details matter, and you might assume that we've communicated, but then that's definitely we did not, right? And I might assume you understood what I was talking about, and that's definitely going to be something that's going to bite us in our backside. So you've got, I would say that I would change communication, and with the agents, it's perplexing to me, even with the really great real estate agents, right? The super ones. How many times a lead comes across, or the potential of a lead, or the whisper, on the wind of a possibility of a lead. And then they make the assumption that somebody else is going to handle it. Or they read a lead that comes in through our lead desk and it says like, oh, I want to buy a foreclosure. And they think, well, I don't know anything about foreclosures, so I'm not going to follow up on that.
Mm.
Well, this is a true life story. And when, I assign that to somebody else who also doesn't know anything about foreclosures, and they call the person on the phone and say, why do you want a foreclosure? Just ask the question. Well, because I thought they were bargains. Oh, well, if you're looking for a bargain, I can show you where bargains are. It doesn't have to be a foreclosure. Now you got a client, right? And I think that even our greatest real estate agents are guilty of that. So I warn your listeners, be on guard. You can't make an assumption about what somebody needs until you have a conversation with them. You
Yep.
can't read a text and know what they mean. You can't read an email and get them figured out. You really
Mhm.
got to get them on the phone and say, what is your need? Why are you doing that?
Mhm.
What was your thought in coming to that conclusion? And people will tell you what they want, and then you can help them. If you don't have that conversation, you can't read a text, a lead, an email, and figure out, whether you can help them or not. You're probably going to leave a lot of business on the table.
That's such a good call out. And we run our business that way too. I do a lot of short-term rental investing, and I get a lot of investors that reach out and say, hey, I want to fix and flip, or hey, I want a long-term hold. And I get on the phone with them. Well, what is your main goal? Cash flow for early retirement. And I'm like, fix and flips, not going to get you cash
Not going to get you
flow.
there.
Long-term buy and holds, not going to get you cash flow. Multifamily, not going to in today's world. So let's actually restructure. And then boom, it's like they just need education, right? And
Yes.
that's where I think sometimes, busier agents, they may not have the time to pull somebody in and to educate them on what they actually need. But if you do take that time, you're providing value, right? You're starting to create that relationship. And ultimately, that relationship base is what leads to a client because they know, like, and trust you.
Right.
So yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. Mike, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Your story, your leadership style, your commitment to building this real estate team, like, and wealth for your agents is very inspiring. So please tell the listeners where they can find and connect with you.
The best way is my website. We just feel like it's the strongest place for people to go. And then you can find all our social medias there too. But that's michaelcarrealty.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for everyone listening, thank you again for tuning in to the Ascend AI podcast, where real estate meets innovation. Don't forget to like and subscribe below, and we will see you in the next episode.